Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I just watched Enola Holmes 2. Let's talk about it. So Enola Holmes 2 is directed by Harry Bradbeer, who also directed the first film, which came out in 2020. And I actually have a review of that very first film, which you guys can check out on my channel if you haven't already. And it just so happens that in that video, I'm wearing the exact same jumper. I am wearing the same jumper in that video because it was the closest thing that I had that would match the poster to that first movie. And it's the same situation here again. So here we are. I guess I could make it a tradition if there's a third movie that has a very similar poster. But anywho's, of course, Enola Holmes in this franchise is portrayed by the one, the only Millie Bobby Brown, okay, who is coming hot off of an amazing season of Stranger Things. So sis has made a home in Netflix and she's getting real comfortable because she's delivering each and every time that she appears on our screens. And Enola Holmes 2 is no different. I had a real fun time with this movie, guys. I thought it was very enjoyable. I think the character of Enola is so likable. I think Millie Bobby Brown does a great job portraying her. And yeah, we'll dive into my thoughts on the plot and the rest of the characters in this video. But before we get into all of that good stuff, as per usual, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel. Make sure you turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next, and also be sure to like this video if you enjoy my reviews. It really helps the channel out and I love to see what you guys enjoy watching. Now without further ado, let's get into my thoughts on this movie. So Enola Holmes 2 follows on from the first movie where we saw Enola break through a huge investigation, a huge conspiracy, and that gave her her first big break. And then you fast forward onto the beginning of this film where we see her trying to use that momentum in order to open up her own private investigator office, and she starts up this whole business thinking that her great reputation from the previous case is going to help her build a clientele. But unfortunately, she very quickly finds out that the fact that she is both very young and very female means that even with the huge success of her first case, she won't be able to build a clientele that easily. And in fact, she's almost ready to close up shop and give up completely until, of course, she does get her very first client in the form of young Bessie, who is there to ask for Enola's help because one of her co-workers, aka her sister, also has gone missing. And then very soon we see this case continue to unravel as Enola discovers secrets and conspiracies that go straight to the top, as a lot of these Sherlockian mysteries are wont to do. And I, as an audience member, was fully engaged when it came to the mystery this time around. I did say in my review of the first movie that one thing that let it down, in my opinion, was that the mystery wasn't very well put together. I felt like, you know, Enola figuring everything out at the very end just seemed a bit convenient. It didn't feel like they were taking us as an audience on board with her journey to figuring out what had actually happened. And instead, she ended up just having this monologue where everything was clarified magically, which didn't really involve the audience in an engaging way. But this time around, it seems as though the writers watched my review. This time around, it seems as though the writers and the director watched my review, okay, with a notepad and pen, and they decided to take some notes and make those adjustments, because I do definitely see a marked improvement on the mystery side of things when it comes to this plot. Like I said, this mystery continues to grow and grow as the film goes on, and it in fact involves far more players than we first suspected at the beginning of the film. But you know, one side of this mystery focuses on the group of factory workers, young female factory workers working at a matchsticks factory. Oh, that's so hard to say. Matchsticks factory. That was such a struggle, okay? But what I really appreciated about this storyline was, first of all, it highlighting the role of these young and sometimes child workers working in a very harsh labor environment, which is of course very typical of the Victorian era. A lot of us will know about the Industrial Revolution, which took place at around about this time, and the UK basically became the factory of the world, but that of course came with a heavy price, especially for the working class, where you have these very young people, even children as young as 5 or 4, working in these horrific factories under horrific conditions, because this was prior to any labor laws being put in place by the government, which at the time was very laissez-faire. They were very much let the businessmen do whatever the businessmen want to do. As long as we get elected, that's all that matters. And that's definitely something that we can't relate to nowadays, right? Anyways, I promise I'm not going to get as political in this review as I was in my review of the first film. Well, I just went on one about the House of Lords. Listen, it still stands true, okay? Everything I said was true, but let's focus on the movie. But anyways, as I was saying, I appreciated the fact that this film highlighted that part of British history, and not only that, but it actually tied into real life historical events, like the actual women's strike that took place in 1888. So at the beginning of the film, you have this title card that says, you know, some of the things that happened here were actually true, or at least the things that matter, and the things that matter basically encompass that strike that actually took place, and it was the very first female workers' strike in the UK, which I think is very remarkable, and I love the fact that that is embedded in the storyline for this sequel. And I think it was particularly clever of them to include it in an Enola Holmes movie, because it shows just how remarkable it is for her to be doing the things that she does, for her to be standing up to authority, and for her to dare to take this position as an investigator, pursuing her passion that is very contrary to what society tells her she should be focused on. When you have that wider context there, particularly when it's rooted in actual history, it really does serve to highlight how special this character is, and it enamors her to us even more. Now, as I said before, this case ended up blowing out of proportion and involving far more players than we suspected at the beginning of the film, and one of those players ended up being none other than Sherlock Holmes. None other than Sherlock Holmes, as portrayed by Henry Cavill, who's been having a moment. Okay, he's been having a moment for sure. But I have to say, I really enjoy Henry Cavill as Sherlock Holmes, particularly in this film. I remember in my review of the first film, I said that he was a little bit stiff and a little bit too emotionless, but here we're starting to see those walls break down a little bit, and he just becomes so much more personable and approachable, especially when he's talking to his sister. And you know, of course, we still have the Sherlockisms, okay? Like, we're not going too far out here. He's still a Sherlock Holmes, so he's still going to have a bit of that abrasiveness. He's not going to be the most touchy-feely person in the world, but I think here Henry Cavill kind of struck that balance a little bit better to make the character feel somewhat more approachable than he did in the first movie, which I appreciated. And I also very much appreciated the fact that we got more of the character in this sequel. I was really happy to see that, especially in the scenes where he was working with his sister. I really enjoyed that aspect as well. They obviously have that cheeky sibling rivalry, but you can still very much tell that they both care about one another a lot. And I also very much enjoyed this like underlying character arc with both of them allowing people to enter their lives and make an impact, a positive impact in their lives, instead of trying to pursue their passions alone and living a very solitary life. And that was the case for Enola, where she let in, his name's like Lord Bridgerton or something. I've forgotten that guy's name. I'll look it up when we get to that section, okay? But she let in Lord Bridgerton. Let's call him for now, okay? The forgotten Bridgerton brother. She let him in, and then you have Sherlock, who lets in his sister a little bit more and actually invites her to live with him, which I thought was such character growth. Loved it, love to see it, okay? But he ends up having a whole different flatmate at the end there, which we'll talk about in a second. But overall, I would say that the way that Sherlock was handled in the sequel was far better, and I was so happy to see him be highlighted even more in this film. And another thing that I really loved about the inclusion of Sherlock in this movie was the fact that he was still clearly better than Enola. Like, I love the fact that they didn't do that thing where Enola becomes, you know, just the best at being an investigator and deductions and all of that. Like, Sherlock has been doing this for longer, and perhaps he's even smarter. You know, this is his thing, so he is better than her. So you see in one scene where, you know, she's tried to figure out this puzzle that's been left behind by the suspect, and she can't quite, you know, wrap her mind around it, and it takes her some time to figure it out. And then he takes one look at this poem, I think it was a poem, he takes one look at it and he's like, oh, that's the address. Like, I found that so funny. And she's just looking at him like, that was just amazing. I really liked that, again, because, you know, you have this female protagonist and oftentimes they're depicted as being, you know, all powerful, all knowing, just straight away. But here you see that actually she has a lot to learn from her brother, and he has a lot to learn from her as well, and that's why I like that symbiotic relationship between them. Although, having said that, I completely respected Enola's decision to stay with her own practice instead of, you know, starting a partnership with her brother, because as she said, she would have been stuck in his shadow had she done that. Like, there would have been no way that she would be able to escape from his shadow, and so she would just be known as, you know, Sherlock's little sister. She wouldn't be taken seriously. Already she wasn't working with him in the first movie, and yet they already accredited her success to him anyways. So imagine if they were in a partnership together, it would just be worse. So yeah, I like the fact that she kind of stood her ground on that front, but I'm still happy to see that kind of sibling bond build in this sequel. And then next up, we need to talk about another Holmes family member. No, not Mycroft, okay, who doesn't make an appearance here in this sequel, but rather Miss Eudora. Miss Eudora Holmes, who's portrayed by Helena Bonham Carter. I love her. Like, I love her, okay? She is an amazing character, very feisty, and she feels like she is Enola's mother. I mentioned this in my review of the first movie as well, but I think that the casting is perfect, and I think that the characterizations are perfect as well. We're constantly reminded of Eudora's influence on Enola through these flashbacks, but I feel, unlike the first movie where the flashbacks are supposed to play an integral role in the mystery taking place in the present day, here the flashbacks are used to show how Enola's upbringing is informing the decisions that she's making in the present day, and I think that's a much more effective use of those flashbacks, and also it gives us more screen time for Helena Bonham Carter, which I loved. So I love seeing more of this character, and I think that carriage chase sequence that she was a part of was spectacular. We have seen a lot of car chase sequences, okay, in our time. We've seen a bunch of them, been there, done that, but have you seen many carriage chase sequences? I mean, we've seen a few of them as well. We've seen a few of them as well, but this one was done well. I very much appreciated that, and I love the fact that Eudora had like these two smoke bombs that were completely harmless, and then that one massive bomb one massive bomb that could clear an entire city square. Another important thing to note when it comes to Mama Holmes is this idea that she raised, you know, all three of her children to be hyper independent. I can relate. I could absolutely relate to this part of the storyline. I was just like nodding my head like, yep, I know exactly what she means. I know exactly how that feels. I absolutely related to that characteristic. I think it fits the character of Sherlock so well, you know, to have a mother who would raise him to be super independent to a fault. The fact that that bled into how she raised Enola as well, I think is very telling. And again, it just helps to create this image of a family unit that is somewhat dysfunctional but still very much lovable. And again, it ties into that storyline about Sherlock and Enola becoming closer and allowing other people in their lives to have a positive impact. And as I said, once again, in Enola's case, it was Lord Bridgerton, whose name, I promise I will look up his name. Just give me 5 minutes, I'll look up his actual name, okay? But Lord Bridgerton. And then in the case of Sherlock, we had the introduction to this world's version of Dr. John Watson at the very end there. I am so excited. Here's the thing about Sherlock, right? I need this version of Sherlock, portrayed by Henry Cavill, to have his own show or series on Netflix somehow. Make it work, okay? I know that Netflix is really upset with Henry Cavill at the moment because he quit The Witcher. Okay, he left The Witcher unceremoniously, so like they're not happy with him at the moment. But hopefully they can get over that and and realize the goal that they have here, because I'm telling you, a series or movie with Henry Cavill as Sherlock and Himesh Patel as John Watson is needed. Okay, when it comes to Sherlock's storyline in this sequel, we see that he himself is tackling his own case that he is really struggling over. He has been able to solve all of these other cases in the past, but this one is leaving him baffled and dumbfounded. Okay, it seems like someone is playing games with him. It seems like someone is trying to dance with him. And it turns out that person is the one, the only Moriarty. Like, we love to see it. We love to see the inclusion of the classic Sherlockian villain Moriarty. This time around, the character is given a big twist, because it turns out that she is in fact the secretary to the corrupt minister who is caught up in the conspiracy with the owner of the matchstick factory. The minister has been profiting from this factory, which decided to swap out its ingredients for phosphorus, which has been killing the female factory workers, and no one seems to care about it except this one girl, Bessie, who helps unravel this whole conspiracy. But then on the down low, you have the minister's secretary who has been leeching off of him, and as she says in her big villain speech at the end of the film, because she is a woman living in Victorian England, she has no way of buying property or shares or anything like that, and so she was forced to, you know, build her own wealth using the minister as a means to do so. And so it explains, you know, Sherlock's big case, it ties it together with Enola's big case, and it introduces us to this world's version of Moriarty. As you could probably tell, I actually like the twist that this world's version of Moriarty is this incredibly intelligent black woman who is portrayed by Sharon Duncan Brewster. I think she did a really great job. I don't think the wig department did a good job with her wig. It's so hard to produce an afro wig, because afro hair isn't really easily replicable with like plasticky materials. It's really hard, okay? It's really, really hard, but that's not the way to do it. Thank you very much, Enola Holmes 2 team, for showing us how not to do it. And maybe for the third movie, since the character escaped prison, right? Maybe for the third movie, we could figure out how to do a wig for a Victorian black female character, because that was not it. Okay? Otherwise, sis gave a great performance, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of the Sherlock Moriarty rivalry. And then finally, let's touch on some of the side characters. And first one up we have is Edith, who is portrayed by Susan Wokoma. I was really happy to see her return for this entry. I really like the character. She's strong and fierce. I would have loved to see more of her in the movie, but she was featured in that really cool carriage chase sequence, so I appreciated that. And then lastly, of course, we need to talk about Lord Bridgerton, or whatever his name is. Let me look up his name. I said I'd look up his name. Let me look it up. Okay, so his actual name is Lord Tewkesbury. That's it. His name is Lord Tewkesbury. Yeah, Lord Tewkesbury is back, and he's trying to make a change in the House of Lords, the unelected house in the Houses of Parliament. Listen, as I made clear in my review of the first movie, I wasn't his biggest fan. I didn't find him to be strictly necessary for that film, and in fact for this franchise overall, which I don't always need a love story Hollywood, okay? But since he's there, this time around, I would say that it was less offensive, right? Like, it didn't involve Enola completely sidestepping her main mission to focus on him. He was just a part of the mission that she was already on, which I think was an improvement from the first movie. And overall, I think the chemistry is there. It's not giving Will and Simon vibes. It's not giving Kate and Anthony vibes, but, you know, it's giving a vibe. Like, I'm not offended by his presence anymore. And I guess it's interesting to see how, you know, Enola in this film was really focused on making a change at a ground level. She, alongside Sarah, who was the missing girl that, you know, showed up at the end, well, both trying to inspire the female workers to strike, you know, against the factory in order to, you know, protest for better pay and better conditions, and for them to get rid of that bloody phosphorus that was killing people, for God's sake. So you definitely get the sense that Enola is more at home fighting for justice and change on the ground level. I do find it interesting that she's paired with this young aristocratic gentleman who is a lord in the House of Lords, and he is able to campaign for change on a national level. I think that they make a pretty good pair from that perspective, and hopefully she could get shit done with him on her side. But overall, it's very rare to see a film sequel end up being better than the original, but I would say that's the case here. I do think that the sequel was better than the first Enola Holmes movie. I think the writing was tighter. I think the mystery was done much better than in the first film. I like the fact that they incorporated Sherlock's mystery and his introduction to Moriarty with that of Enola's, and how they rooted all of that in real life historical context to me worked very well. And just in general, this is a really great world to return to. I like this version of Victorian England that they've woven, and I'm looking forward to seeing what's next for this franchise. So with all of that being said, guys, I'm going to be giving Enola Holmes 2 a 7 out of 10. So that's it from me. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on Enola Holmes 2, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of this movie down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!